Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you at our latest digital teacher leader webinar. I'm hosting this month, Jared here. Welcome, everybody. We're glad to have you. We have got a full session today. I'm going to jump into my slide deck and turn it on so that we can see what we've got going on here. 1 second. Here we go. So hopefully you can see my slide deck now. Let's jump in and see what we've got going on this month. This month, we're talking about data-driven decision maker. So we've been going along with the ISTE coaching standards all year. And this month, you can kind of see in this idea that we're going to share with you a little bit, a coach models and supports the use of qualitative and quantitative data to inform their own instruction and professional learning. So we'll share a few different ideas about this today as we kind of go through our session. A couple things that I just want to make a couple of quick announcements, and we'll go through these just a little bit beyond this first slide. This Thursday at 3:30 p.m., we've got a webinar for you where we're going to go over some ideas about what to expect when you go to the USET conference. A lot of you may be going for the first time, or maybe you're going back after the first time last year. We want to share with you some tips and tricks of making that a successful conference for you. Next week will be the USET conference on March 14th and 15th. A couple other things just to make you aware of as well. We've got the Adobe field trips. We've been recently contacted by Adobe and seeing if schools want to bring some of their faculty and students out to their Lehigh office. If you have an interest in that, please contact your digital learning specialist and we'll make arrangements to help you get in touch with them and how you could fill out a form to possibly apply to go down there on a field trip. And last, we've got our most recent episode of the Jordan Journey with Brooke Anderson. She's going to be presenting in just a moment, but she's also been kind enough to be part of our podcast this month. I'm just going to show you a couple of these things in just a little more detail. So you can see here is the most recent episode of the Jordan Journey, Becoming a Knowledge-Driven Educator, where we talk with Brooke a little bit about how we can use data to inform and guide our practice a little bit. So we had a great conversation about that that's available on all of your streaming platforms for podcasts. So Apple, Google, Spotify, and the like. So we hope you can, if you haven't heard this podcast yet, we hope you'll take a listen to it. We want to remind all of you as you continue to do your monthly technology trainings, as you go into our Canvas course, just to go in and make sure you report your trainings that you do and kind of find access to all of our great information. So just a reminder that in the Canvas course, you can find all these resources and ways to report your stats. So I mentioned this just a second ago, but again, if you have teachers in your building who are going to USET for the first time, or they just want to know a little bit more about what's new at this year's conference, we'll be hosting a webinar at the same URL that you're in right now on Thursday at 3:30. So that'll be just a half an hour where we kind of go over what can you expect from USET 2023. And like we mentioned, you'll have access to a lot of great information at USET this year, including some great keynote speakers and tons of great sessions. So we look forward to seeing you next week down in Provo for that conference. One thing that we did want to point out to you, just by way of announcement, is the sessions that are going to be done by our digital teacher leaders that are in the room here, so our digital learning specialist. I'm just going to quickly just kind of pop up each one of our sessions so you can see it. We've got Deanna who's going to present Nearpod in a minute, using Nearpod for formative assessment on the 14th, so Tuesday. She'll be a poster session that starts at 10 a.m. We've got Tracy doing integrating tech tools into content areas. That'll be in the afternoon on Tuesday, so that's another great session you can check out. Bonnie's going to be doing a session called Create Your Own App using Google Sheets and the App Sheet extension. That'll be on Wednesday at 2 o'clock at the conference. I'm jumping in doing a couple of different sessions on instructional coaching. I'll be going at 3 on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And I'll be doing that session with CRK and Amy Kinder. And then later in the afternoon, I'll be working with Larissa and Colby on Elevate Your Coaching with the ISTE standards. So I'll be doing those two sessions. Colby will also be doing a session called The Future is Visual, Create Visual Communication with Canva. That's a typo because
Yeah, it used to be scheduled for them. They double booked me, but now it's at 2 o'clock, same day.
Okay, so 2 o'clock on Wednesday there.
Yep.
I just was curious how you're going to pull that off, Colby. We know you're good, but that's being really good.
Yeah.
Ross has also got a couple different sessions that he's involved with. Elevate Your Voice via podcasting on Thursday at 3:15, and he'll be doing a session on Learn Platform on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And Larissa's going to be involved in that session I mentioned a moment ago about elevating your coaching standards, your coaching with the ISTE standards. So you'll see a lot of different opportunities to catch up with one of the digital learning specialists in our district. And we hope you come by and see us at the conference. We're excited to have you participate in that. Okay, one more. How did I forget Kira? Kira's going to be involved in everything next week at USET because she's the USET president-elect. But she's got a session that's a recorded session that will be available. So it doesn't get released until Tuesday at 12:45, but that one's a virtual or recorded session. And then her second session is on Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. USET Live, easy ways to start podcasting with your class. So that's her session as well. So we are excited to do that and be part of USET next week, and we hope you all join us for that. We're going to jump in with our presentations today. We are grateful to have two fantastic presenters. Brooke Anderson is going to stay in this room. So if you want to hang out and stay in this Zoom room, Brooke's going to be sharing some ideas related to this data-driven decision maker. She's going to share how can coaches help teachers understand and utilize classroom data. So how to make that more effective and how you can influence student learning with the data that you collect and receive. Bonnie is going to go into the Zoom room at the bottom of your screen, and she'll be presenting on digital exit tickets and formative and summative assessments, so how you can create those and use those in your class. Let me just quickly, I'm going to just share Bonnie's link in the chat as well. Oh, you already did, Bonnie. Thanks for reminding. Yep, so Bonnie's link is in the chat as well as on the screen right now. But we appreciate you all participating today, and we look forward to you enjoying your session for the next half hour or so. So those of you that want to go with Bonnie can leave and go into the other room. Those of you looking to stick around with Brooke, you're welcome just to stay in here and we'll get going. And Brooke, I'll make sure that I share with you presenter rights. Sorry, make sure that you got.
You're good.
The share screen. I don't know if I did that yet. Oops, somebody's saying they can't access Bonnie's links. I'll share it one more time. Here you go, Mary.
Then I don't want to confuse with another link, but I put together a Nearpod so we could do a little bit more online interaction.
Oh, yeah, great.
So if you're joining us, please go ahead and join that Nearpod. Great. People were actually able to join, meaning I remembered how to do that correctly.
It is working, yes.
That is good news. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Jared, why don't you go ahead and give me a stop time? What time are we aiming to stop today?
I would say you've got about half an hour, so that would be about 10 after 4.
Perfect. All right. Okay, and it looks like we've got 7 participants. This will be great. Okay. So we're talking today about being a data-driven decision maker. And so I wanted to start doing a little bit of pre-talk and pre-assessment by going over who is my favorite data-driven decision maker. And it is a man named W. Edwards Deming. He is known as the father of quality. He is a mathematician, an engineer, a professor, I should say he was, an author, all kinds of, lauded for all kinds of things. But you may have read things about like the Toyota way, or things about manufacturing in Japan post World War II, and how there was an explosion of quality manufacturing post World War II, which seemed to defy all the odds in that country. And really, W. Edwards Deming and his philosophies are responsible for that, because he focused on how to achieve quality through better management. And I think a lot of the time when we're talking about data, that's really what we're trying to talk about. How do we actually improve the instructional experience and improve the quality of that experience by using data? As a little pre-assessment, I want to get a feel for where you guys are. I've got 10 quotes from Deming, and I just want you to pick one that you feel like is resonating with you right now.
We're going to be all over the board.
And that's good. That's good.
Yep.
Okay. We were all over the board, although we are kind of centered on 3 different quotes. Oh yeah, if only we could, only we could choose more than one. I deliberately wanted to force you into one choice though, just because I thought that would be interesting. So why don't we talk a little bit? We really centered on 3, B, C, and F. Can someone who chose B tell us about why that resonated with you?
Can you hear me? My microphone doesn't
can.
always work. Okay. I chose B because I've been in situations where no matter how hard I worked, or no matter what I put into it, it didn't matter because the system ruled what could happen and changed things. And it made it really, really hard to want to be successful in that system, because no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't win. Does that make sense?
I'm nodding my head, and I probably a few other people are too. Because especially when we're looking at education data, we might be looking at data that has so many influences for what creates these outcomes. And we may not be sure how much of that income outcome can I influence. And so that's always kind of a concern to keep in the back of our minds, is when we talk with teachers about data. What kind of things can we actually, find an entry point to work with? All right, what about C? It is not enough to do your best. You must know what to do and then do your best.
I chose that one. I think that defining the problem is something that once I really learned how to define the problem, I just had far more success. So that's what what I felt like that was about, is really diving into solving the right problem.
Right. And I think that also speaks to the question about what do we have control over? Like, let's define the problem in ways that, we can see here is something that we can do. Here is the area that we can influence. And just so you know, I have that quote, "It's not enough to do your best, you have to know what to do and then do your best," actually posted in a little frame on my desk. So I also really like that one. And what about F? "Wherever there is fear, you will get wrong figures."
I chose F because I think when you are afraid and you do things out of fear, you're limiting your view, you're limiting where you can go with it. So you're not really seeing the full picture and getting the full story.
And how important is that feeling of being comfortable and safe in asking questions? You know, not just to ask the right question and to define the problem correctly, but you have to feel not afraid to be in the discussion about that problem or about that question. And that might be a lot of the work that you're doing as coaches, is just helping teachers know, okay, we're talking about data, but you don't have to be afraid of this. We're going to define a problem that we can actually talk about, that we can actually make a plan for.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So looking at the coaches standards from ISTE, I narrowed in on the data-driven decision maker standard B, support educators to interpret qualitative and quantitative data to inform their decisions and support individual student learning. So that's what we're looking at today. But I am changing it because I disagree with the implied position that you have to know the difference between qualitative and quantitative data. I would say, for our purposes, it is irrelevant which data is qualitative and which is quantitative. It's just data. And so I would say, let's look at multiple sources of data to inform decisions and support student learning. So we're really going to be focusing on, we're going to interpret multiple sources of data. And I'm going to share with you just a little tool, a little protocol called a ladder of inference for interpreting multiple sources of data. So you can Google, and I invite you to do that right now. Just, escape, make the screen a little bit smaller, and then Google ladder of inference, because it's not like there's just one ladder of inference that someone published and we all use it. It's just a way of thinking about inference. So you'll find ladders that have, 8 rungs and ladders that have 4 rungs. And, a lot of different descriptions, but really they boil down to being the same thing. And this is the way that I think of it. So when we're working with data to draw conclusions and ask questions, we're starting with all the data that we can get, anything that can be observed and recorded. We want multiple sources. And then from that, we're going to select relevant data depending on our question or our target. And I would say in education, it's really important that we are able to name what is being collected and what is being counted. So people talk about, like, if you want to talk about attendance, what actual data are you collecting and counting? Are you talking about tardies? Are you talking about excused absences? Let's all be on the same page about what data we're actually looking at. And then from there, once you've got this relevant data, and you would want to be able to describe and paraphrase it, making sure that everyone is looking at a shared set of facts. That's the foundation that you want everyone working from. And this step number 2 is probably where you're going to spend the most of your time, because you want to make sure that everyone actually understands what they're looking at and that you have a shared understanding of what you're looking at. And so in this step 2, you wouldn't be doing any kind of evaluation. You're not making interpretive or evaluative statements. I think it's because, you won't say the word because in step 2. Because comes later. You're just saying, I can see that. I can see that student attendance or that unexcused absences have increased this year over last year and last year over the year prior. You're just making descriptive, factual statements, because that is where all kind of interpretation has to start from. And then once you've got a shared sense of reality, then you're going to draw conclusions and name what is likely happening and how you think and why you think so. So what do you think is happening? What is being demonstrated to you, and why do you think so? And this is going to rely on judgment. And you might have to go back and pull in more data because you might come up with more questions in this step. And then from there, determine what would be a reasonable course of action. And here is where I want to talk also about the term data-driven, because I hear that term in the ISTE standards and I hear that term around in a lot of places. And I am a data scientist. I taught for 15 years at the middle school level, and then I went back to U of U and got a degree in information systems with an emphasis in data science. And I personally really do not like the term data-driven, because that implies that data is in the driver's seat and that it is telling you where to go and what to do, which data cannot do for you. I like to say Jesus may be able to take the wheel, but data cannot. You always have to stay at the wheel. And data can be a good navigator. It can give you course correction, like it can tell you, what's going on around you, but it can't make your decisions for you. It can just be information that help and support your decisions. So we're really going to focus today on step 2 of this ladder of inference. Describe and paraphrase data and create a shared set of facts, or what I like to call a shared reality to work from. And as always, we have one of the best data scientists ever, besides W. Edwards Deming, Sherlock Holmes. Remember, he said famously, it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. One begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts. And you'll see this happening when we talk about data with educators, because they'll immediately jump in, well, it's because of this, it's because, you'll start hearing that word because, very, very quickly in the conversation. And so what you want to do is just practice holding off on because until you can really describe what you see. So there's not very many of us. I think there's 7 of us. So let's just choose. What would you guys like to look at? I prepped some data on 4 topics that just kind of popped out at me. Well-being of high school girls, elementary attendance trends, 8th grade math, or kindergarten literacy. What looks good to you?
Do you want to have people share in the chat? What do you
let's
want
do
to
it.
have? Oh, I'm glad that you guys are picking
We
well.
got 2 votes for number 1.
I didn't want to be the only one to say that.
3 votes for number 1. 4 votes. Okay, that's the majority. All right, there we go. We are going to look at data about the well-being of high school girls.
Yeah, these guys are done looking at kindergarten literacy. They've spent a lot of time looking at that.
Yeah, I kind of wondered. All right, so I'll go ahead and share this folder with you. That link should pop up on your Nearpod, but we'll just put it in the chat as well. This is just a Google folder where I've put some views. And we can look in the 4 views that I collected about high school girls. And so right now, we're going to take a minute and we're going to take like 5 to 10 minutes. And we're going to practice just describing what we see. Yeah. So I'm going to open up. There, no. There we go. I'm going to open up this little board and I'll put 4 Post-it notes for each of the 4 views. And then you guys can add your thoughts and your little Post-it notes saying, okay, here's what I see in these views. So view number 1 is from a survey, a nationwide survey called the Youth Behavior Risk Survey. It's done by the CDC and Utah participates in it. And they ask a question. They've been asking this for a long time, over 20 years. How do you feel sad or hopeless? Like, how do you regularly feel sad or hopeless? And so we can see here that we've got results for boys and girls. And we want you to describe what you see in that chart. Regular feelings of sadness or hopelessness. Okay. And then another chart, I felt too unsafe to go to school. How often did that happen? Again, divided out by boys and girls. What do we notice? What do we see?
And again, Brooke, you don't want us to give our theory. You just want us to describe what we see.
No becauses. Not yet. We're not at the word because. Just describing straight up what we see in front of us. And then this view, these are responses from the panorama survey that students just completed mid-year. And I had a hard time deciding which questions to include, so I included probably more than I should have. But you can see which questions, you know, where boys and girls are differing, or where they're together, you know, which questions both genders would have a harder time with. So SEL questions. From the panorama survey. And then I also put in the attendance data to go along with the idea that people are reporting how reluctant they feel to go to school. So how often are they going to school or not going to school? So we have the percent of their enrolled days that they are absent for boys and girls.
Brooke, you said this is nationwide, right?
Thank you for asking that. All of the data that you're looking at is Utah specific. The survey is administered nationwide, but this is Utah specific data. Just from
Okay.
Utah's results. This isn't Jordan district specific data for the youth behavior risk survey. But this panorama survey data is Jordan specific. So this is just for Jordan district. And the days absent, that's also just for Jordan district.
Thank you.
That is part of step one, where you're naming the data that you are looking at. Well done. I'm going to put some hearts on here. And we can see the number of sad and hopeless teens is on an upward trend. There is a gap between boys and girls, and it widens after 2017. We see increasing sadness over time. We also see some dips in prior years. That there is a big jump in girls feeling unsafe. That there is that there is a concurrence thing. Two things are happening together. There is a higher percentage of hopelessness or reporting feelings of hopelessness and sadness, and a higher percentage of absenteeism. And so for each of these phenomena that we can see a trend for, we're seeing an upward trend. Correct. Yeah, Andrea, there's been some switches back and forth between boys and girls and feeling unsafe to go to school. Okay, and now I can start seeing those becauses coming in. Is it because of social media? Okay, you guys are doing a great job describing what you see. One of the things that I would like to add, I'm going to note that the gap in absenteeism is very small. relative to the gap in feeling sad or hopeless, and relative to the current gap in feeling unsafe to go to school.
Will you please remind me on the panorama survey? I know there's the number, but then there's that light line. There's two of them. What do those represent?
All right,
I know
let's
they're
look.
significant for something, but I don't remember what.
All right. So let's look at this one. How often are you able to control your emotions when you need to? So we can see for male students who are represented in orange, they have a higher score saying that they feel like they can control their emotions more often when they need to than female students. Does that answer your question?
I understand that part, but there's that light gray line that goes all the way from the top to the bottom, that vertical line.
Oh, like this thing right here. Okay, those are like grids. So we
Okay.
can see that probably this grid represents, okay, I need that to stop highlighting. I'm gonna reopen that. We can see that we've got a grid for the number 5 here, the number 4 here. Probably the grid for 3, 2, and 1 are more obscured.
Okay.
So this SEL data from Panorama, that was just taken, right?
This is fresh off Panorama.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it closed out maybe last week.
Yeah.
I haven't ever heard of Panorama before. How and when is that
Thank you
used
so
by
much
the
for asking
district?
that question. So Panorama is a social emotional data visualization interface, and one of its major features is student survey tools, where you survey students about their social emotional wellness, asking questions like, do you feel like you belong at school? Do you feel like you can do the things that are asked of you in class? Are you confident in your ability to complete your schoolwork? So it has all these, various dimensions of social emotional wellness. And some schools have implemented it or use it more than others. And there are district surveys that go out ostensibly to the whole district, even though there's not 100% participation in them. And mostly people who are looking at this are administrators and counselors. There aren't very many teachers who have kind of been rolled into the Panorama implementation. So mostly this is a tool for administrators and counselors to see, are we doing better in terms of social emotional wellness or not? Where are the needs? But if your school has this, and it does, and you're like, wow, I would really love to see this for my student. That's a great thing to talk to your administrator about and say, hey, can I see a summary of my results for my class? And can I hopefully see those results getting better over time? That's what we want to see. All right. So one of the other things that I'll point out, let's see. In this folder, you'll notice that there's a data dive protocol. And what the experience that you just had, where I ask you, hey, look at data and tell me what you think, that can sometimes be overwhelming. Like, I don't know what I think. Like, what am I supposed to describe? So one of the things that you can do is go through these 4 steps and look at if I can compare it to a standard. Do I know what is supposed to be happening? And I can compare it to that. And I compare it to a prior performance and say it was better or worse. Can I compare it to others and say the student is doing better or worse than someone else who's similar or a group that's similar? Or can I just look for consistencies and inconsistencies? Because consistencies and inconsistencies have a story, especially inconsistencies have a story. When you see consistencies, that's usually a sign that teachers have been working really hard to produce that consistency, because we know students aren't consistent on their own. So if you're ever stuck and say, what do I say about data? Here's a hint. Look for the inconsistencies and consistencies. All right, so let's go through and talk about our interpretations. On the ladder of inference, let's go up one more rung. We've described and paraphrased the data. Let's draw some conclusions. What is likely happening and why do we think so? Go ahead and put your conclusions into the chat. I think that's a good way to do it. What are some interpretations and conclusions you might draw from this? Or questions? Oh, that's a great question, Joanne. If we go back and see who doesn't feel understood, are we going to see that those students are also more likely to be absent and more likely to report being in a bad mood or feeling sad or feeling upset? That would be a great thing to look at. All right, and Elizabeth or Beth, that's a really good thing to point out. Are we seeing, we have social media being introduced around 2013. Is that an explanation for why we see that big rise in girls feeling, pressured and sad and hopeless? It's possible. We don't have anything that proves the connection in this data, but we have it as a possibility. All right. Well, what you've probably found here is a desire to look at other data. I just want to see what happened here and here and here. And that's always a good thing to have. And if you, oh yeah, we can also mark some COVID effects probably in that absenteeism. For sure, for sure. If you are wondering what other data you can look at for your students or are curious about, please reach out to me at brooke.anderson@jordandistrict.org. This is something I do for teacher teams. They might ask me, can you put these two pieces of data together and so we can see which students are more chronically absent and which students are feeling more like they're not doing well in school, and is there a relationship there? And I'm happy to do that. But you guys have climbed the ladder of inference today, and I really thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brooke. That was fun. That was a great exercise. You know, it's so interesting because if I was looking at any one piece of that data in isolation, I think I would come to other conclusions. When I look at them in tandem, though, I get to see more of a story.
And that's very much the truth about data.
Yeah, because if we were just looking at absenteeism on the rise, you'd say, oh, well, towards the end of the last couple of years, of course, that's COVID, right? Like people are just more careful about it. But if you start looking at 2 or 3 pieces of data, and then you look at that year, first of all, the data started to change in 2017. So, okay, that maybe not where it's at, but yeah,
Right.
super
So
interesting.
is this because of social media? And then the next bump, is that because of COVID?
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. Well, thank you, Brooke. We appreciate it. Appreciate all of you coming in and joining us today. We hope to see you later this week in our USET webinar or just in USET in general. We can't wait to have you attend that conference next week. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.